Retroglyph Podcast.
Can you tell us a little bit about how the gameplay is going to differ between the Hierarchy faction and the Novus faction?
Well, I'll start with the Hierarchy. The Hierarchy is our kind of big, prudish, sloppy, powerful side. They're meant to be almost a completely assault-driven side. They don't really even, the whole design philosophy behind the walkers was, you don't have a base, you just walk around. You stomp, you keep moving, you drop units as you go. They're kind of a scorched earth territorial denial side. As we were coming up with their units, that really played into the way that they collect, which is why they can kind of pick up, houses and trees and people and cows and everything for resources. They were literally burning everything off the planet as they went, and the walkers and radiation and everything completely played into that as well. So when you're playing as the Hierarchy, you're really not concerned about building defense. You're concerned about offense. You're concerned with stomping over to the enemy base and crushing them as fast as possible. And especially when we get to talking about Novus, you're going to see why you want to do that quickly. Hierarchy is also concerned with very heavy-hitting, area effect, sloppy weaponry. The idea of a sniper unit to the Hierarchy is completely foreign. The idea of cloaking to them is completely foreign. They just put more armor on something or just bombard you more to get rid of you rather than trying to precisely shoot you out of a vehicle or something like that. Playing as this side, you're going to be very aggressive. You're going to be moving constantly. You're going to be upgrading your walkers with all kinds of hard points, weapons, production augmenters, tech devices. And your research also plays into this. The different research branches that you can take with the Hierarchy are all kind of centered around making them deadlier with different avenues of combat. Do I want to be more, the radiation territorial denial guy? Do I want to be the guy that's walkers just can really kick ass when they're stomping through a base? Do I want to be the guy whose secondary units that support the walkers really are the things to emphasize while I'm playing? And although the walkers are really powerful, they also are vulnerable to certain types of attacks. So that's why you have a whole complement of extra units that go with the Hierarchy walkers, is to protect the walkers from the kind of attacks that can take them down. And each walker itself has a different puzzle, almost like a boss in a console game, in how you actually defeat them. So it's not just a matter of doing more damage to a walker. You actually have to think about how you attack them and how you approach them while you're fighting the Hierarchy. So that gives the Hierarchy an extra edge while you're playing them, because you know that a player can't just mob you with damage to kill you. They've actually got to take different tactics, and you can use that to your advantage by protecting those weak spots with your other units. So it becomes really a game of knowing what the enemy is going to be bringing at you in order to best play the Hierarchy. The Hierarchy is not a fast side. They are not an information-heavy side. They're actually starved for information most of the time and kind of clueless, but they're so powerful that they don't really need to rely on that. But as a good Hierarchy player, you're going to want to use the avenues you have of scouting to really see what's coming at you so that you can prepare, customize your hard points, bring different units in and out from orbit, so that you can have the best possible defense when you're fighting against these other factions. Novus is great. Novus is a sentient machine race. Originally, they actually had, I'm going to go into a little bit of the story here, I can't help it.
Okay, no problem.
Originally, they did have a human component or humanoid component to their race, but the Hierarchy, years ago, came through and actually wiped them out. But the machines managed to survive and rebuild themselves into this race that has taken it on themselves to avenge their creators and all of the other races that that Novus has encountered that the Hierarchy has wiped out on different planets. Compared to the Hierarchy, they build insanely fast. Whereas the Hierarchy uses glyph carvers and builds one thing at a time and drops them from orbit, Novus can have multiple builders working on a project at once. Unlike the Hierarchy, they build full bases. You have a full base, a complement of structures and defenses and upgrades that you can build onto these structures. So Novus really kind of establishes themselves. And then the great thing that Novus has is because they're also computer-based, they have what's called flow. As you play with Novus and start to build your infrastructure in your base, you start to create this spider web of signal transmission towers that literally connect to each other. So after a while, you've got this literal visual spider web of network lines that are running everywhere on the battlefield. Novus can use these to actually break their units down into nanites and flow them along these electronic lines to appear anywhere else on their network. So as you start to build out your base with Novus, you start to gain the ability to literally move your collectors, all your infantry units, and through certain researches, even your vehicles through these network lines, allowing you to literally appear anywhere across the map that Novus has expanded to in almost an instant. This gives them a huge advantage in combat, but is also tempered by the fact their units actually can't take a lot of damage. They're very much a hit and run side. They're very much an information side as well, so you know more about the battlefield than almost all the other sides, but you need it, because you always want to pick the fights on your terms with Novus, because if someone gets to you and you're not ready for them, you're probably going to be killed. And kind of like cockroaches, Novus has this amazing ability to just spread and move about the battlefield. You can set up new buildings very quickly. They can be torn down very quickly, though, so you have to be very careful of that. Generally, things build fast, but they're expensive as well. So, Novus, although being a rush side, it is more pricey to play than the hierarchy is. So that's something you're going to have to get used to, and how much resource you need to collect versus building units. Novus also deploys a lot of sneaky technologies. They have the ability to camouflage units as terrain. They have cloaking units. They have an entire system of viral control that they can do to enemy structures and vehicles. They can literally plant viruses onto things which can spread to adjacent vehicles. They can take control of those units. They can have them reveal for them. They can cause damage through detonating the viruses and shorting out the electrical systems of everything. So they're much more of a finesse side. Actually, in some ways, they're really this hyperkinetic side. Whereas the hierarchy, you're kind of slow and pounding along and really concerned with your walkers and your units. Novus, you're constantly scrolling all over the map. Okay, what am I doing over here? Okay, I got to build signal tower here. Okay, I got to go back here and get this guy to flow. Okay, I got to go over here and do this. I got to do this, go do that. You're constantly moving around and jumping around and playing this hyperkinetic game, and it feels very much like you're part of a computer that's multitasking and doing things very quickly. And that's the kind of mindset you need to embrace, really, to play Novus well. One of the things that Novus has also is, in addition to all of the flow and kind of how their units work and their research, is the ability to patch. And whereas the hierarchy has this neat system of hardpoints, so they can kind of go in and customize their walkers depending on what they want to do in gameplay, Novus has a series of patches that they can download into their units. Patches are kind of like playing cards with like a Magic the Gathering type game. You can literally have two of these in play at any one time, and the patches do different things to your side based on your research. So you can have up to like 12, is it 12? Yeah, 11, 12 different patches that we have in the game that you can use to change the way that your units play in the battlefield. For example, there's an overclocking patch, which for the next 30 seconds all of your units fire and move much faster than normal, but they also take additional damage because you're actually stressing their systems more than they should normally be operating under. You have patches that allow your units to detect, to do spectrum scans in order to see cloaked units. You have patches that allow you to become more resistant to radiation or more resistant to other types of weaponry we have in the game. And the nice thing is there's so many combinations between running two patches simultaneously that there's a lot of emergent gameplay and tactics that can evolve from depending on what patches you use at what point in the game. When we're talking about resources for the factions, one of the things that we wanted to do after coming off of Empire at War and Forces of Corruption is we wanted to avoid a problem that we were seeing where someone would become so rich in galactic play that they would, combat was pretty much meaningless in terms of spending money. So what we've done is we've split our resources for Universe at War. In our global mode, which is a whole other story you guys will hear about later, we have cash, and that actually drives your economy at that level. When you're down in a battle in tactical combat, you actually use raw materials. And every faction needs to somehow generate raw materials. The hierarchy does this through the use of their Reaper turrets. The Reaper turrets are these great little walking vacuum cleaners, for lack of a better term, that go around the battlefield and literally suck up almost everything there. They can pick up cows and people and houses and cars, and anything they come across is actually a resource for the hierarchy. And they convert this into a base matter that they then use to assemble and build all of their units. The process is a little gruesome, so we won't go into that, but suffice it to say that anything is almost a resource for the hierarchy. And some things, taking advantage of their radiation, radiated things are actually worth even more because it's been almost pre-processed for them. So one of the fun things you can do is use the defilers, which are really good at running around and radiating everything, especially civilians. You can use those to kind of radiate the civilians and take control of them, and then throw them at your Reapers so that you can then pick them up and get even more value from them. Novus is very different in that Novus is actually a lot more eco-friendly than the other side. They're a good guy, so to speak, in our universe, and Novus actually isn't trying to interfere with humanity and everything, in a destructive way like the hierarchy is. So Novus actually collects scrap. They can collect scrap from destroyed vehicles, destroyed walkers. If you take a walker down, you've got a buffet sitting there that you can just harvest off of with your collectors. They can pick up cars, junk, debris from destroyed buildings, but they won't go out of their way to destroy anything initially in order to gain resources. If the player wants to become a little malicious in how he's collecting resources, well, that's up to them, and we'll leave them to make those moral decisions for Novus and how they're going to play. One of the neat things about the game is because everyone uses different resources and even collects different things on the battlefield, you end up having a game where everyone's fighting over something else. So whereas cows aren't really important to the other factions, the hierarchy loves cows. They're one of the most valuable resources, and it's kind of, yeah, it's a joke, but it's one of the more valuable resources that we have in the game for them is cows. So whereas the other sides don't care about them, you really don't want the hierarchy to get them. So suddenly you have this game where even in the resource battles, people are fighting over different things, and you're taking different forces and guarding things that are valueless to you because they have value to the other faction. So that's something that's neat and is really fun and different in our game than a lot of other RTS games. And you're not fighting over the same exact things, but you really want to keep them away from the other factions. So you find a lot of combat evolving out in the middle of the field, whereas these different resources are concerned because each person is trying to get a different thing out of the battlefield.
So you think if you're Novus, do you think you'll be cow hunting then to make sure the hierarchy doesn't get any
you're
cows?
definitely going to be wanting to be cow hunting and corralling, because you're not necessarily going to kill the cows. You might, look the other way and do it, but you definitely want to keep them away from the hierarchy. And while Novus is not going to go
from the cow farm,
right? Exactly. You want the cow farm. You want to corral them and hide them in the corner. Civilians are the same way. The hierarchy can totally leverage those for not only extra units but for resources. Whereas Novus is just really going to want to try to protect the cities and keep the people out of the hierarchy's hands, because that's just a huge gain to them monetarily and for fighting forces. So again, you have this nice mix of trying to protect things that might not be worthwhile to you, but are very worthwhile to the other factions.
We also have a few media questions for you.
Sure.
First one.
James, Strategy Informer. How long has the team been working on Universe at War, Earth Assault, and what's the relationship with Sega been like since production started?
Universe at War has been going on for about 2 years now. It's getting close to 2 years, and that includes pre-production and everything that happened before we went into actual development. We were concepting and building the factions and the units and kind of figuring out what everything was going to be. Through the entire process, Sega has been wonderful. They've been a great partner to work with. I'm always been fond of Sega because they've always kind of valued creativity over almost everything else in their games. Really great gameplay and really creative ways to use that gameplay, and they've been a wonderful partner to work with. Every developer that you work with is very different from the last, and every publisher that you work with is very different.
Cool. Question 2.
Adam and Sage King, this is Jonathan from GameReplays.org. We were wondering what you guys are mostly aiming for, micro or macro management, and how are players exactly rewarded when they take advantage of these more in-depth tactical options?
Well, we have micro and macro in the game, but we have that split into almost modes. So we have a full global strategic layer to our game that you guys will get more information about in the future. And that's really where you're doing more of your macro planning. You're bringing your strike forces around, you're planning your attacks into territories, figuring out what that guy has there. The micro is all down when you're actually playing with the units, and we do have an emphasis. I would say it's probably a 70-30 between our global layer and our tactical layer in terms of how much time you'll spend in each. We really wanted to concentrate on making a great playing real-time strategy game, and that was really our focus when we went into developing the game. So you're going to spend more time down on the battlefield, building your bases, controlling your units, using their abilities, getting the upper hand, taking over the territory, and finally, crushing your opponents, hopefully, in the battles. But we really wanted to emphasize more on the actual experience with the units because we're putting so much time and energy into creating very different sides and very unique abilities for each that we really wanted to concentrate more of the gameplay down onto the field rather than keeping it up on the global level.
Perfect. All right, Adam. Thanks a lot for spending some time with the community and answering these questions.
Oh, you're welcome.
End of transmission.